Hello and welcome from Telford and Wrekin Council's question and answer session. This is the second of two in very quick succession. Only last Friday we held one of these to talk about going into Tier 2, and all of a sudden we're going into a national lockdown. My name is Chris Kowalik, and on your behalves I will be asking questions to our panel. It's a four-strong panel this time around. On what the national lockdown restrictions will mean for Telford and Wrekin. So in no particular order, they are on the panel today: Cllr Shaun Davies, leader of Telford and Wrekin Council; Nikki Minshall, Service Delivery Manager in Health Protection; Sophie Lane, the Revenues Service Delivery Manager; and Claire Critchell, the Growth Hub Manager in Prosperity and Investment. Good evening to you all, and I'll start with Cllr Shaun Davies. Shaun, we were in Tier 2, we are in Tier 2, albeit just for a few days, and now we're going to be part of a national lockdown. Is this the right move?
Well, the numbers right across the country have significantly increased. The numbers of people going to hospital has significantly increased. And unfortunately, those people who are requiring ITU and services and care is increased. And sadly, the numbers of people dying from this illness has increased. So the numbers were out of control. They have been for quite some time. I would have preferred a circuit breaker a few weeks ago to coincide with half term. However, that wasn't taken forward by the government, but we are where we are, so to speak, and therefore we do as a community absolutely have to comply, cooperate and join in with the national effort to get these numbers right down so that we can have a relatively normal Christmas, fingers crossed.
If this does last for 4 weeks, though, then this will effectively be a circuit breaker.
Well, the circuit breaker idea was 2 or 3 weeks to coincide with half term because the numbers then were significantly lower than the numbers are now. So this circuit breaker or national lockdown will be harder and longer than it had to be previously. But the government, as I say, have made the decision now to do this national lockdown. And my message is very clear to the residents of Telford and Wrekin and businesses of Telford and Wrekin. Let's all rally behind this like we did in March. Let's get our numbers right down here in Telford and Wrekin. We were consistently below the national and regional averages. Let's do that again. And my promise to residents of Telford and Wrekin is also very clear. Every step of the way on this journey between now and December, the council will be here to protect, invest and care in communities, businesses, community groups, and we will do what we did earlier in the year, which is to be on the side of our residents, on the side of our businesses in any way that we can. And this evening is about that, because I know there's a huge amount of questions out there, a huge amount of confusion, and this session is about clearing up that confusion.
And we'll have a good go at going through those. Just one more for you for now, though, Shaun. On Saturday evening, following the newspaper and media reports throughout the day, we had the Prime Ministerial press conference and statement announcing the forthcoming lockdown. And then on the Sunday, I understand you had a meeting with the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government in Robert Jenrick. What was said there?
Well, we had a meeting with the Secretary of State, as you say, on Sunday. I also had another meeting with him today, just to make sure that we are absolutely clear on what the government is offering around business support grants, around the ability for us to help the most vulnerable within our community. And it was also an opportunity for us to push back as council leaders around support for self-employed, the support for the hospitality sector, and just some of the nuances of the rules, because there are rules that the government have published that, to my mind, don't make complete sense. So, for example, pubs can stay open and operate a takeaway service for food. Supermarkets can remain open and sell alcohol, but pubs can't offer a takeaway service for alcohol this time around. And I think there's some real issues around that, because I think the reality is that pubs and restaurants right across Telford and Wrekin, that's a huge income source for them. So we're looking at pushing back on some of the rules. Clearly, this has to go through Parliament tomorrow, and the measures then come on Thursday. So the government still have time to tweak some of those rules that don't necessarily make complete sense.
Okay, we'll start to look at some of those rules and the questions that they have brought about. But before I do that, if I turn to Sophie, Nikki and Claire, whoever wishes to answer, but in your roles, I know from my job within the council that you've been extremely busy, but just what have the last 7 months been like for any of you? Who wants to answer?
I can answer
None
that
of them.
one.
Right, Sophie.
My team usually bill and collect council tax and business rates for the authority. Last year we collected in excess of £250 million for the authority, so quite a lot for us to achieve each year. Obviously the lockdown that we went into in March changed our job roles completely. We issued in excess of 2,500 grants to local businesses to the region of £30 million. We've also awarded over 30 million in reliefs to business rates customers as well. And we administered council tax payment holidays to customers as well, 10,500 of those. When we came out of lockdown, we started to look at recovery again, taking a sensitive approach, knowing that some of our customers will have been affected by COVID and the pandemic. And now we're moving back into another round of grants. So it's been extremely busy and very different.
And we'll go into where that information will be, how people can get more help on that in due course. This is how it's going to work this evening, by the way. Thank you for all the questions that you have already submitted. We're going to go through those, 20 of them, and that was before we went live a few minutes ago, and then we will then start to address the questions that are now still coming in, and thank you for all of those in the conversation. We won't be able to answer all of them. As Shaun has said, this still has to go through the Commons, it still has to become law, and as a local authority we're still waiting for clarifications and guidance on many areas. So we will answer as best we can. When we can't, we'll say so and the reasons why, and then when we are able to, we will revisit this post and go back through the questions and add answers to the comments and the conversations that are beneath this video post. If you're looking on Facebook, we are also broadcasting on YouTube, and it'll be available for catch up there later on as well. And our team in the back are monitoring YouTube as well as Twitter for any, as well as Facebook for any comments and questions that are coming in. So here we go. Question number 1: are skips planning to stay open during this lockdown? I think by that we're talking about the household recycling centres.
Yes, the answer is yes. Household recycling centres will remain open for as long as they can. But what I will say very clearly is that our absolute commitment is to continue, and our priority is to continue our red top bin collections and our curbside collections, so recycling and green waste and cardboard recycling. We'll keep the HRCs, the tips open as long as there's capacity to do so. The only set of circumstances in which those will close is if we have to switch resources from there to our curbside collections. Last time we were one of only a handful of councils in the country not to reduce any of our curbside collections. So I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, that will be the case this time.
Will there be a council tax holiday available? There was last time round.
Yeah, so this is in regards to the council tax holiday that we offered at the beginning of the first lockdown, which enabled residents to rephase their council tax payments at the beginning of the financial year. We're not offering that this time for 2 reasons. One, the national lockdown is only scheduled to take effect for the next 4 weeks into December. And if you are facing any hardships or any difficulties paying your council tax, then we'd encourage you to contact us so that we can look at your individual circumstances. And that actually is our approach all year round. So please do contact us if you're having any difficulties with your council tax.
Moving to My Options, and when will customers of My Options be informed if their day provision will be cancelled?
So in terms of My Options and the provision that My Options team offers, this is an area that we are waiting for guidance on. Clearly, there is an exemption around vulnerable people, but in terms of the ability to continue to operate as normal, that is something we're looking into. I don't know whether Nikki wants to add anything on that.
Hi, thanks, Shaun. Yes, I know that the My Options team are contacting all the family centres today and tomorrow to talk to them about alternatives. that will be available during lockdown. There are bubbles that are being supported within the community. There will be individual conversations to ensure that they take into account all of the individual circumstances, and we will not be closing the 2 day services that are open so that we can continue to service people who currently attend.
The next question goes back to actually to something you said a moment ago when we were talking about your meetings with the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick, Councillor Shaun Davies, and about the offer and the package from government. And the question is, how much extra money has the council received due to the second lockdown?
Okay, so this is an area where we are still in discussion with the government. There is a pot of money that's going to be made available from the government, to which we passported to councils for us to devise a discretionary business support programme. However, a big however, we do not know the details around that at the moment. The moment we do, the moment we'll start communicating to businesses. I will just highlight that we were one of the first councils last time in the country to get our discretionary fund up, running and launched and paid out. So we absolutely want to be in the same boat this time, but we are still waiting for guidance. We've had some money from government in order to enhance our local track and trace capacity, and we've had some money in regards to helping, or some promise of money I should say, in regards to us being able to support the most vulnerable. Again, all of that is up in the air at the moment, and we're pushing government. I was pushing the Secretary of State today on that, and we're waiting for further guidance.
What about funding for the council? You've spoken throughout the year, much of this year, about the financial black hole created by the pandemic. At the last count, what was it, 17 million?
Yeah, so we've got a huge budget deficit for many reasons. The first reason is that as a council over the last 9 years, we've deliberately gone after a commercial approach to try and make up for the lack of government grants, which has been cut over the last 10 years. And so things like, for example, ice rinks, leisure centres and so on, we've not privatised those like other councils have. Clearly, through this pandemic, we've seen a significant shortfall in income from those ventures. We're also spending more money in areas like adult social care, safeguarding of children, health protection, enforcement. And again, not all of that money has been compensated. So the government did make a clear commitment at the beginning of this pandemic that the full costs of local government would be covered. And we are asking the government to hold true to that. At the moment, we've got about £11 million shortfall for this financial year alone. And just so people understand, as a council, we absolutely legally have to set a balanced budget. So we can't go into the next financial year with a deficit. So we are working hard to address that deficit.
What effect might this lockdown have, though, financially?
Well, this lockdown is at the moment, according to the government, time specific, so it's 4 weeks. So we will see a significant impact upon our leisure facilities, our ice rink, or all those types of facilities that clearly will be closed. Our theatre, for example, our pantomime hasn't gone ahead, which is an event that normally helps us run the theatre for the whole year. We'll see, no doubt, huge increases in people needing council tax support that we'll be funding, huge increases of demand from our tenants in our commercial property. And also, of course, additional costs around PPE, enforcement, education, and so on. So the numbers will go worse as a result of this lockdown, without a doubt. And me and other local government leaders across the country are pushing the government to come back to what they first said, which is that local government costs will be fully compensated. Because let me level with residents, if they're not going to be covered by government, that means 3 things. 1, we'll have to reduce services. 2, we'll have to increase council tax. Or 3, we'll have to do a combination of the 2. And therefore, it's in all of our interests for the government to stick to their word and fully compensate councils. And I'm asking the government to do that every time I meet them.
And bottom line, you have to balance the books in 5 months.
Yes.
Going back to the pre-submitted questions, how many children or teenagers have tested positive in Telford during the pandemic, and have there been any deaths?
Nikki, did you want to pick this up? Because I think there's quite a bit of data around this, isn't there?
Yeah, I can pick that up, Sean. I think starting with the good news, there has been no no deaths from COVID amongst children and teenagers within the borough. From March last year to the present time, we've had 386 positive cases in those aged 0 to 19. And just to give the listeners some kind of perspective, that's 18% of the total cases that we've had within the borough.
We'll move on to schools and universities. Some questions have come in on those. Why are schools and local universities still open when there are high infection rates? The questioner asks, if this was my business or pub, it would be forced to close. Yet students still mix in town and they have parties off campus and in their off-campus homes. What is being done?
Okay, so I'll turn to Nikki in a moment in terms of some of the enforcement action around students not following the rules, because first of all, that is unacceptable, and we will take enforcement action alongside the police for those people not following the rules. But to answer the question right, sort of dead on, the government have made the decision that schools, universities and colleges should remain open during this second lockdown, which is a direct contrast, of course, to the first lockdown. Now, there are reasons for that. So, for example, they would say, and I think the evidence does bear this out, that transmission rates, particularly amongst primary school children, is low, which means that there's very little evidence that children are transmitting the infections between one another in the primary school setting. That is less true as you go up the secondary school into secondary schools, colleges and universities, who of course transmit in the same way that an adult would. The second reason is that actually education is really, really important, and we do need to make sure that we don't have a generation of children who aren't getting educated throughout school. And for example, there are children, particularly in early years, that if they do not learn it now, they'll never ever catch up. That is true to say in terms of children who are approaching GCSE and A-level and degree level courses. So it's really important we get that balance right. The other thing to say is that schools and university and educational settings are very good at putting COVID secure measures in place. So, for example, if there is an infected child or a child is showing symptoms, because of the bubble arrangement that they've got, we're able to, as a council, lock down that bubble, isolate the children involved, and make sure that we contain the illness. The real challenge, I think, and I think this is where I've got to say the government haven't been particularly supportive of the council and schools, is that when children are self-isolating, there should almost be a seamless transaction, to online learning. And we were, as a council, promised hundreds of laptops from the government to go to primary schools and secondary schools and colleges, and that has now been cut by 70%. So we do need that additional support so that when children are isolating, they can go straight into e-learning, and that's really, really important for us. I think Nikki maybe can pick up some of the specific questions around educational settings where students aren't following the rules. But before I pass over to Nikki, it is absolutely critically important that everybody does their bit to follow the rules, and where people don't follow the rules, it really does fly in the face of common sense, and it also does quite rightly get up the noses of people who are following the rules and doing their bit.
Nikki?
Yes, thanks. So just to follow on from what Shaun has said, that with specifically, because this question talked about Harper Adams, the public protection team at Telford Wrekin Council works very closely with West Mercia Police, and we've been having meetings with them on a weekly basis since we went into lockdown in March. I know through those conversations that West Mercia Police did actually take action against students that were found to be not following the rules, and have issued fixed penalty notices on those students. To again just put some kind of like figures on the cases at Harper Adams, over 76% of the positive cases at Harper Adams were actually not within the university accommodation. They were within shared houses, mainly in Newport town area. Telford and Wrekin Council Health Protection Hub have been working very closely with Harper Adams since before the universities went back in September. And as Shaun says, we've assured ourselves that they have very good COVID secure measures. So the university was doing their own test, tracking and tracing of the students that became positive. They were then informing the Health Protection Hub, and we were doing the contact tracing to make sure that all the students and their contacts knew to self-isolate. They had been given that advice. Additionally, to give reassurance to the people of Newport, officers from Public Protection visited all the premises within Newport last week and were able to give businesses COVID secure advice to ensure that they were fully compliant with the rules.
The next question continues with schools and whether there's anything to add to the answers already given, but I'll go through this question. When will schools close? Too many children and teachers are testing positive every other day, with kids and parents being messed around on what days they're in or not. 30 teachers just today were off from Abraham Derby, says the questioner, and that's just one day. Therefore, years 8 and 9 were told to stay at home even longer. Kids squashing up together on buses, with some not even wearing masks. New lockdown seems pointless if what I have mentioned continues.
So for the rules around schools opening or not does not rest with the council. The council has no legal power to close schools, so it would be a decision for the Department for Education as part of the government. And I've already answered where they are in terms of why they're keeping schools open. I think in terms of, from my perspective, there are a couple of things that need to happen. First, I would like to see mass rollout of testing in schools, colleges and universities, similar to care homes, where children and staff with symptoms and without symptoms are tested each week or fortnight. And I think the testing capacity is there, and the government should do that. That's not something as a council we can do. That is not our role as a council, but I have made representations to the government that that's what should happen. Secondly, where there is a need for children to isolate, there should be a seamless switch to online learning and support, and that's really, really important too. And thirdly, in regards to the specific comment around children on buses, I'll ask Nikki again just to remind everybody the rules around face masks within schools and on buses and so on. But there has been a picture that I've seen circulated of children from the Lightmoor area going to a non-Telford Wrekin Council school, which we are raising at senior levels at Arriva and senior levels within Shropshire Council, because in that case, actually, our young people weren't doing a huge amount wrong. They were being admitted onto the bus, and I think there's a real responsibility for bus companies to take their responsibilities really, really seriously. So we are raising that, and we'll continue to take any appropriate action that we can do, but obviously working with our colleagues at Shropshire Council in that particular example.
The next question.
Sorry, Chris, did you want just bring Nikki in just regards to the rules around face masks for children, because I think it's really important.
Go on, Nikki.
Thank you.
Yeah, so face coverings for children, those under year 7 currently don't have to wear them. Those that are age 12 or above should wear them on public transport. We, as Shaun mentioned at the beginning of this piece, we went into Tier 2 on Saturday. As a Tier 2 area, it actually became mandatory for secondary school children to wear face coverings in corridors and shared areas within schools. And the recommendation was that primary school teachers should also be wearing them in classrooms and in corridors. The Director of Education, Simon Wellman, has a weekly newsletter that he sends to schools, and I know that this week face coverings is something that he has led on, and I think there's guidance that has gone out to schools today about face coverings. But just to reiterate, anybody that goes on public transport, adults and children over the age of 12, unless they meet the exemption requirements, should be wearing a face covering. It's really important. This includes when you're standing at the bus stop waiting to get on the bus.
Thanks, Nikki. On to the next question. Now, we're going into these particular scenarios, individual scenarios for individual people. Will I be able to continue giving a friend's child a lift to school as she is in the same class as my daughter and lives too far from school to walk?
So there are exemptions around childcare bubbles and support bubbles, but there are, as always, lots of ifs and buts. So I'll hand over to Nikki to give you some of the ifs and buts.
Okay, so yes, as with all guidance, it's complicated. So to the person that asked this question, I'm sorry that this is a slightly complicated answer. So first of all, if the child is under 13 and you have formed a childcare bubble with your friend, then yes, you can carry on giving a lift to your friend's child. If, however, the child is over 13, then the guidance would state that you can't give a lift to the child. So I think that that's important to know. And with regard to childcare bubbles, it's important to know that these aren't transient, that if you form an informal childcare bubble with another household, that is the household that you should carry on with your informal childcare bubble with. It's not one that you can be, I'm having a childcare bubble with this friend this week, but then friend Y might need my help next week. It's make the decision which childcare bubble you're in and then stick to that. The childcare bubble does not preclude you having a support bubble with a single adult household. So you can have an informal childcare bubble and you can still have that support bubble with a single adult household.
Am I able to drive my mother-in-law back home to Essex during lockdown? We are her support bubble as she lives alone, or do we need to take her home before or after lockdown? After that 4-week period.
So my understanding is that you can travel as long as if it's essential to do so, and you can support somebody who's vulnerable. So again, it'll depend in terms of the particular circumstances of the relative. But Nikki, again, did you want to pick up this one?
Yeah, so in this particular case, that as you've already formed a support bubble with your mother-in-law, you should be able to take her home. As Shaun has said, that what the government is asking us to do is minimise any unnecessary travel, but assuming that this travel is necessary to take your mother-in-law home, you should be able to do so.
Another particularly directed question in terms of scenario: can someone visit the home of elderly, terminally ill relative, particularly to help in grocery shopping and household tasks?
So my understanding is yes, you can, because you are using the exemption around helping and supporting vulnerable people. Clearly, if it was just one person living in the house, that support bubble could be extended, but it sounds like there's two in the house. And I think that the government guidelines are very clear that the list given is not exhaustive. And I think that any right-minded person would think that the support that you're offering would be acceptable in the circumstances. But Nikki, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Shaun, on that one.
Turning to business, this question has come from a small family independent car dealership. No showroom facility. We know that car showrooms will have to close. They have an open yard with an office. So this question is directed to you, Shaun, by name. What's your take on their situation? Are we allowed, they ask, to stay open, or do they need to close? The guidelines show that car showrooms do need to close, but non-essential, i.e. cars, can offer click and collect.
Yeah, so take this question in two parts, and I'll hand over to Cllr to give any specific advice. The government is very clear that if you can't work from home, then you should go to work. So in those circumstances, that covers the angle about going to work itself. In regards to the non-essential element, then I would imagine this would fall under the category that people would not be able to go shopping for that purpose because it's not an essential purpose. However, as has already been mentioned in terms of grey areas, there is a grey area because clearly for some purposes, for some people, it would be an essential purchase. So Claire and Nikki, I'll look to you two in terms of this particular example, please.
I guess the key point is that this isn't an indoor car showroom. This is effectively an outdoor car showroom, isn't it?
Yes, it is outdoors, but it's whether or not it is termed to be an essential retail product. Nikki.
Yeah, so and I don't know if we've mentioned yet, Chris, but although we've had guidance from the government, what we haven't yet had is the detailed regulations that have all the lists of the different types of businesses that are classed as essential, and where some of these nuances will actually be made clear. And we're not expecting the clarity of that legislation until at least Thursday. But what I can go on here is what happened in the lockdown in March. And in March, car sales were deemed as non-essential. But what I would say to this business owner is that they can still offer sale via their website. So they can sell cars via their website, or they could sell via the phone if they haven't got a website. Non-essential retail premises can continue to trade via click and collect or through takeaways if they're a food business. And I don't know if Claire wants to come in with any kind of support that we as a council we're going to give to these businesses to try and diversify.
Yeah, so that's exactly the point. The business support team are available to take through any businesses through any one-to-one guidance. So if you get in touch with us, we do run a number of workshops and training events that will also help people to develop a website if that's something that you need to put in place in order to, take on board any of the guidance that government put out there. So yes, if you do have to diversify and switch your business online, then make sure you keep in touch with the business support team. Either get in touch with us directly. I think Chris is going to make sure that we get all the information out there today so that you can do that if you haven't already done so, and we can support anybody through that process if it's something that you want to try and do.
And the telephone number for the business support telephone line is Telford 567589, or you can go to the email address of Enterprise Telford, all as one word, Enterprise Telford @telford.gov.uk to arrange to speak to a business support officer. Business question, but this time from a customer. How can customers support local businesses with Christmas shopping now that the shops are being forced to close again? They don't want to resort to the likes of Amazon and companies like that, they say.
So over the last few weeks, hopefully people have seen a huge amount of activity from the council to trying to encourage people to shop local, to back their local high street, keep the Telford pound in Telford, and we know that the vast majority of small and medium businesses on the high street employ lots and lots of local people. So it's really important that we do all our bit to back our local high streets, and we're backing that up with a Revive and Thrive fund on top of the Pride in the High Street funding that we've been providing over recent years. So in terms of over the next few days and then the next few weeks, then obviously these businesses will be open until Wednesday evening. So get out there if you can in a COVID secure way to spend local. And then hopefully what you'll see is a number of businesses saying that they can still operate a takeaway service if it's around food, click and collect, or website or telephone orders. And we've been doing some work in terms of trying to help our businesses diversify and upskill them onto websites and so on. Clearly, this lockdown has come a little bit earlier than we thought that would be the case, but certainly do try and still back local and shop local if at all possible. And remember as well that many at the moment the government is saying that this is a time limited lockdown, and therefore at the beginning of December these shops will all being well reopen, and therefore you might want to put off a bit of your Christmas shopping until December and do your shopping locally then. But that's my message really. Trying your best to spend a few pounds in the local high street does go a long way to help protect local jobs.
The next question is from some. Go on, Claire, sorry.
Sorry, just to add to that, just say we are packaging up a support package for high street businesses that will include training and online, workshops to shift their business online if they're able to do so quickly, and also marketing and social media. And also we're looking at some virtual high street events in the build up to Christmas. So that might be a way of you accessing and supporting local high streets, as Shaun's mentioned.
The next questioner does private tutoring in a dedicated tutoring room in their own home. Can this education, they ask, continue as long as they have safety precautions in place?
I'll turn to Nikki for this question. It's obviously very niche.
Yes, and this is another one where there's one of two answers. I'm really sorry. Again, the guidance is silent at the moment on whether tutoring can take place. But we think that if it's after school tutoring, then unfortunately the answer would be no, that you can't continue to do your tutoring because of the government restrictions on having people within your house and limiting that. However, if this tutoring forms part of that child's education and is the main source of education, then because education is continuing, that we think that in this situation you would be able to do it. So I'm sorry that answer seems to contradict itself, and that on one hand I'm telling you that yes you can, but I think if it's out of school tutoring, then unfortunately at the moment I don't think you can do it. But as I said earlier, we are still waiting the clarity of the legislation to fully understand all these nuanced questions. So if we've got your details when they come out, I will ask officers from Public Protection to follow up on this answer to make sure that you have the clarity.
And if the public protection team don't have your details to the person asking this question, then send an email through to coronavirus@telford.gov.uk, and that then does go to the public protection team. My wife and I run a small carpet and flooring shop. They ask, can they stay open as they are classed as housewares or not? They ask. Some of their competitors are staying open, and others are saying that they will close. So there's an inconsistency of message there. Personally, I think, says the questioner, we should close, but it's got to be fair for all. Please advise.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to Nikki's comments earlier around there isn't at the moment a list as such of businesses that can and can't open, but I'll turn to Nikki in terms of where she thinks this may go based upon last time.
Yes, thanks. So initially, when we went into lockdown in March, homeware wasn't classed as essential retail. And then if you remember, around May time, garden centres and those selling homewares were put onto the list, and that allowed carpet shops and furniture shops to sell their wares. So it all depends this time where the government goes, whether they actually put homewares as essential retail or it's classed as non-essential. If it is classed as essential retail, then I think as a carpet and flooring shop that could be classed as homewares and you would be able to open. If it isn't classed as essential, then as Claire has said before, there is always online sales, over the phone sales, you can do click and collect, you can do delivery services, so that you would hopefully have some ways of continuing to trade.
And then just to build on that, and this is a general comment, if businesses are required by the government to close, that's the point in which we get business can access the government scheme, which is up to £3,000 per month based upon your rateable value. And maybe Sophie could just go through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are waiting on full government guidance on this again. So the information that we've got is fairly limited. But the government have said that for businesses that are required to close, if their rateable value is up to £15,000, they will receive a grant of £1,334 for the 4-week period. If their rateable value is between 15 and 51,000, they will receive £2,000 for the 4-week period. And if their rateable value is over 51,000, they'll receive a grant payment of £3,000.
and that's for the 28-day period in which the lockdown is at the moment planned to happen. And then we're still waiting, as I said earlier on, around any rules around discretionary funding, and that is a big grey area at the moment. We're still I was pushing Secretary of State Jenrick on that this afternoon.
I'll leave the question of if the 4 weeks becomes more than 4 weeks. We'll leave that towards the end for your thoughts on that, Shaun. But what if it does extend beyond the 4 weeks? Then, in terms of those grants, what might happen, Sophie?
Well, they've said these grant payments are per 4-week period. What they haven't made clear in the guidance so far is if it's a part period. So if it's a further week or a further 2 weeks, will they get a proportion of that grant? We don't know until further guidance comes from the government. What I can also say at this point is the government have said this afternoon that we will receive full details by next Monday. So hopefully early next week, we'll be able to update our website with all the information.
And what we will absolutely do is at the moment we've got clarity, we'll be pushing that out to businesses through our communications. We'll be launching our business support line, and we'll get the information out as soon as we've got it.
And in terms of businesses, you can sign up to the Enterprise Telford Business Bulletin. It's an email bulletin. If you visit the website, which is all the W's, enterprise-telford.gov.uk, then you can subscribe to information there. There's also a raft of information from Telford Wrekin Council that officers are frantically, as quickly as they can type, they're updating the pages as best they can. But the areas to look for are, as well as the enterprise-telford.gov.uk. Was that .co.uk, Claire? Please correct me.
It is, yeah, right? It's .co.uk.
It is .co.uk, so let's get that right. It's enterprise-telford.co.uk. There's information there. And then on the council's own website, you can go to one of two areas predominantly. They are telford.gov.uk/coronavirus and also /public protection. More of the business information you'll find in the public protection area. And if you have any specific questions, particularly in terms of the enforcement of the rules, or maybe what the rules are, clarifications, business help and support, then you can email coronavirus@telford.gov.uk. And if it's a health related question, if it's in relation to the administering of the rules in the way that Nikki has been explaining just now, then you've got the Health Protection Hub that Nikki works within, and you can email them, which the address being healthprotectionhub@telford.gov.uk. Are driving instructors allowed to carry on with lessons?
So I'll hand over to Nikki on this one as well. I do know that driving exams have been suspended. So Nikki, just in terms of driving lessons themselves, please.
Yeah, driving lessons unfortunately will be suspended in England from Thursday the 5th of November until Tuesday the 2nd of December. There's more information on the government's website, Chris, and we've got that link if we want to put it in the chat for people to have a look at the end of this conversation.
What about tests?
Tests have been suspended as well, yeah.
Same again.
Yeah.
The questioner says they own a dog grooming business. They work alone. They have a COVID secure premises, which allows just one person in at a time, only to drop off and pick up dogs. The council have been in and they've seen this for themselves and they're happy with the setup. The questioner can't find any clear rules to show whether they need to close tomorrow. Can you help?
Yeah, so I've had a couple of emails on this particular question, and again, the answer is not a simple yes or no, so I'll hand over to Nikki to give you the ifs and the buts.
Yes, with dog groomers, during the first lockdown, my colleagues and I in the public protection team had many conversations about whether or not they could open, and eventually we went to OPSS, which is the Office of Product Safety and Standards, and they came back with clarity and said that dog groomers could open. So assuming the government's thoughts are the same during this lockdown, I think that dog groomers should be able to open. However, I think there are a couple of things that all of you should think about. Whether or not it's essential travel for your customers to drive to your establishment to drop the dog off may become into question. So that being the case, can you collect the dogs, or could your customers, using their unlimited exercise that we now have during this lockdown, we're not limited to 1 hour a day, walk the dogs to your establishment? I think that's something to consider. You've probably already all adapted to online payments. That's really important. I think it's really important to review your cleaning procedures to make sure you've got those in place. Always make sure that any of your customers go through that clarity of checking to make sure that they're not coming from a household where there is either somebody with coronavirus, or that they are not self-isolating because they've been in contact with coronavirus. If that is the situation, then really you should say, no, I'm sorry, please delay the dog grooming appointment until such time as you've finished your self-isolation. Wash your hands and sanitize regularly, and please remember that social distancing is very, very important in breaking the chain of transmission of this particular disease, so maintain that social distancing.
Thank you for the questions that are continuing to come in. We're on to the last of the pre-submitted questions, and then we will turn to those that have been coming in the Facebook conversations and chat and in the comments. And if we can't answer them, then we will revisit the post later on, and then we'll answer them as best we can in text form within that conversation. But as we've been saying throughout this chat here, of virtual verbal chat, all the guidance isn't there, and therefore we can answer as best we can, but we can't answer everything, but we're doing the very best we can. I'm a photographer with family shoots scheduled this week and throughout the month, and these would take place outdoors, and the people being photographed will be from the same household. Will these still be allowed to go ahead, providing social distancing is being maintained?
Okay, thank you for that question. Again, I will just repeat what was said earlier in regards to there's not a long list of businesses that can and can't work at the moment. Again, this is not a straightforward yes or no answer, I don't think. So I'll turn to Nikki again, because there is an interpretation to the guidelines.
Yes. Again, apologies for not being able to give the person who asked this question absolute clarity. What I have done is I've looked on the Association of Photographers website that states that the new restrictions most likely will allow production work to continue. What you won't be able to do is to visit people in their homes, if that is the case, and that includes their gardens. So again, when we have some clarity, if we've got your email, then Public Protection will email you that clarity. So apologies for not being able to give you the clarity you seek tonight.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it's not clear from the rules under what category somebody will leave their house in order to be to have photographs taken. So again, it's a little bit of a grey area, but as Nikki says, we'll update you as soon as we can.
So from the questions that have been coming in while we've been speaking, we turn our attentions back to schools. If my child is asked to self-isolate and I have time off work to look after my child, am I entitled to the £500 payment, even though the schools can't give out the 8-digit track and trace to be able to claim this payment? I haven't earned anything for 13 days now, and so should the family of any child asked to self-isolate be entitled to the £500 payment?
Thank you. That's a hugely technical question. So I don't know if our team here can answer that. No, I don't think so. So what we'll do is if that person can email me directly at shaun.davies@telford.gov.uk, and we'll look at the guidelines. There's a huge amount of the £500 payment, for those who are listening that don't know, is a means tested payment that's available from the government, which we administer on their behalf. There's a whole raft of rules around who and who can't qualify for that. So we'll need to dig into that guidance to understand whether a parent of a child that's asked to self-isolate. I think, and this is just my understanding, is that the guidance for the £500 payment is for people who are told to self-isolate after testing positive for coronavirus, not anybody else in their household. But we will absolutely look at that and ask the question of government around that if you want to email me.
The next one isn't a question, it's a comment. So Sean, I'll put this to you and I'll leave it to you as to whether you wish to comment off the back of this. Vulnerable children who were shielded last time are now expected to attend school. If they're kept out, you face a fine for unauthorised absence. It's a parental decision, surely, to keep your child safe. This isn't fair, they say.
So the government this time, unlike the first time, has been very clear that children and other people who were asked to shield last time will not be told to shield this time, but will be given advice as to whether or not they want to shield, and that would also extend to children. If a child is not at school because they are shielding because of a known and documented medical reason, I believe that would be a consideration for the head teacher in terms of authorised absence. Well, I do know from personal experience that where that has been the case, schools have continued to set work for children who are home isolating or shielding and engaging with them, and that would be the expectation. But just on this particular point, it's really important that a positive relationship is built up between parents and parents, carers, and school head teachers on this particular question. In my experience, there is no head teacher in Telford Wrekin that will not want to bend over backwards for children in this set of circumstances. And obviously I don't set the rules around prosecutions and fixed penalty notices, but I would struggle to understand how it's in the public interest for a vulnerable child to be who isn't at school, for their parents to be fined or sent to court. But that is all about the specific individual circumstances of that child. So please do speak to your head teacher so that the support can be put in place.
We have two questions. I'll read them both for a collective answer. And this is on the management and the implementation of COVID regulations in schools. The first part reads, is it the school's responsibility to stop parents and childminders from crowding and pushing in at school collection time? This isn't about the children, it's about the parents. And should these adults be wearing masks when picking up the children? The further question then is, what impact does the council have on schools' COVID secure positions? For example, my daughter's school no longer has staggered starts. They use the changing rooms, they meet other years in the corridors, and they've gone from no cases to 7 cases in 3-year groups in about 8 days.
So I'll turn to Nikki in terms of the COVID secure risk assessments for schools and our role in that. But what I would say is clearly the big government department that we as a council deal with is Department for Local Communities. The Department for Education has a whole raft of rules and regulations that schools must follow. Now, I know, as being a dad doing the school running to a Telford school, that I have been asked by the school to wear a mask when I'm dropping off my son, and I know that is pretty commonplace across Telford Wrekin, but that is down to the individual school mandating at the moment. The legislation of when you must wear a mask is for government, and government must set those rules. And of course, it's really important to say that some people don't wear masks for very good reasons, and there are exemptions for people wearing masks. But in terms of the enforcement of it and the rule setting, that is a national decision that the government must follow. But I do know, again, from personal experience, that schools are advising people to wear masks. And of course, even if the school that you send your children to haven't asked you to do that, there's nothing stopping you as a parent wearing a mask if you feel the need to. In terms of staggered starts, I'll turn to Nikki on that in a second. And in terms of crowding outside school gates, well, there is an issue of personal responsibility here for parents to take personal responsibility and to observe social distancing. Social distancing applies outside schools as it would in any other setting, and it's important that parents do that. I do know, again, from my council role, but also through personal experience, that many schools have staff on gates around sort of key access points, just trying to police that. But ultimately, it comes down to people using their common sense around the school run. But Nikki, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but would you mind just picking up the COVID secure risk assessment and our role in that, please?
Yeah, I can certainly add to that, Shaun. So again, I think that there has been communication sent out by our Director of Education this week to all schools, reminding them of the importance of social distancing at the school gate. It is a matter of each school to instruct parents to wear face masks, but again, as Shaun said, it is a choice we can all make. If we are able to wear face coverings and we don't have the exemption to wear it. In terms of COVID secure, one of the teams that I manage is the internal health and safety team. And from when schools first went back in June, when we had the year 7s and the year 13s going back, we have worked with schools on their risk assessment. Their risk assessments are what makes them follow the COVID secure guidance. I know only this week that further updates have been sent to schools in terms of what they should be doing to ensure that they've got the COVID secure guidance. And I know that my team is working regularly with our community schools to ensure that the schools fully understand the control measures that should be in place. Within the health protection hub that I'm working in at the moment, which is where we're doing the contact tracing, anytime that we are dealing with a school where they have unfortunately had cases, we again review all the control procedures that that school has in place, and we're able to offer any kind of support and advice that they need. And if necessary and the school wants it, then officers are able to go out and actually see those controls as they're taking place within the schools, and that has been very beneficial. So I think that in terms of COVID secure, I think we do have a lot of checks and balances. However, if anybody has got any specific concerns about a school, again, Chris, if we could ask them to email into the Health Protection Hub, and we can follow up on those concerns.
And that email address is healthprotectionhub, all as one word, at telford.gov.uk. Someone's been trying to get through to the registry office. They can't get through, so they're asking here. Is the registry office still open if you have an appointment to give notice?
So the registry office, as I understand it, will be closing to the public, but I don't know whether or not we're taking phone calls or emails. I'm looking to my colleagues. Do we know? So my understanding is certainly face-to-face appointments will not be available due to this restriction, and further information will be provided in terms of that particular service area tomorrow.
My son has appointments in Birmingham Children's Hospital, and we, so parent and son, go in a car with the driver from another house. The son has heart failure and has to be seen. Can they still carry on doing that?
Yes, that would come under the exception of helping a vulnerable person.
Will children's play areas remain open during the lockdown, or will they be closed again?
They will be left open. However, it's really important that we all use our common sense and play our part. So children with their parents should be sanitizing their hands before, during and after use. It's really important for me to say that as a council, we do not have the resources for us to be able to clean play parks after each day or after each week. We've got hundreds of play pieces of equipment across the borough, so it's really important. It's really important that children and adults practice social distancing whilst at our play parks. And it's really important that we all follow the rules around using those play equipment responsibly.
What happens to staff at the leisure centres?
So our leisure centres clearly will be closed. As a council, we're not able to furlough our staff. So what we do is we ask our leisure teams and those teams who are subjected to their primary areas of work being closed to help us with other sets of priorities. So, for example, in the first lockdown, many of our staff from leisure helped us with delivering free school meals to our residents. We are also going to be deploying staff to help boost our track and trace once that's allowed. We'll also be using our staff out and about. So, for example, you may see leisure staff outside playgrounds, for example, giving advice and guidance. So all of our staff will be used subject to their contracted hours.
So they're still employed, they're still earning, but they're just doing something different.
Yes, that's right. And I want to pay tribute to all of our staff who work for Telford Wrekin for all of their hard work over the last 7 months or so, but in particular those members of staff that have been seconded and deployed in elsewhere in other areas of work which they don't necessarily get involved with through their core contracts. And actually, I know it's easy to bash the council because we're a faithless organisation, but actually our staff, the vast majority live either in Telford Wrekin or Shropshire or just outside, so our local residents do a fantastic job, and not one person has, as far as I'm aware, have said no, they're not going to help. So we're got a really good workforce, and it's really important that we all say thank you to them when we see them out and about.
I've been advised that there are so many questions coming in, so many in capital letters. So I hope you're sitting comfortably still. We'll plough on as
well. I
best
think
we can for all of these.
We are the warm up act to the Biden-Trump election. So we'll keep on going as long as we can.
A couple of school questions. Did Southall School have a visit as 6 teachers have tested positive there?
Did Southall
School have a visit as 6 teachers have tested positive there?
When we have an outbreak, and an outbreak is defined as 2 or more confirmed cases, our Telford Protection Health Hub will visit schools and locations and review the COVID secure measures. They'll do tracing where possible and give appropriate advice. So the answer is, Nikki, I'm looking at you in terms of the specific question. I guess the answer is yes.
In this particular instance, we didn't visit Southall, but we did give them COVID secure advice. As I say, that the visits to schools normally take place on the where we feel that if there's a particular infection prevention control need, or the actual heads invite us to come along because they just want reassurance about their COVID secure measures.
A concerned parent questioning in relation to an unnamed school in the borough. With 30 teachers testing positive in this school, why are our children still going? And will the parent be fined if they take their children out of that school?
So clearly we've addressed this quite a few times this evening. So as a council, we have no power to close schools down. That isn't a power that we have. That power rests with the government and the Department for Education. So there's a policy decision from government to keep schools open. And they would say, if the government were here, that's a balancing act between the risk and harm of COVID and the benefits of education, and what mitigation and what measures you can put in place to control and contain this virus. And I've already said, from my personal perspective, I do think that the government should introduce weekly mass testing of children and staff, those who've got symptoms and those who have not. And I think that will come. It's happened in care homes, and I think it will come. And it's something we're pushing really hard as a council to get government to do. And I think also what we do need to have is a system where children who are self-isolating and need to isolate then have a seamless switch to remote working. And again, that is something we are pushing the government to support our schools on. In terms of the question around fines, I think that's a slightly different question from before, where a child was shielding. So I think the government rules are that you would be fined in those circumstances of not sending your child to school.
The team behind the scenes are collating the questions that are still coming in. They're trying to group them as best they can into subject areas. So now we're talking about tradespeople and tradespeople working in our homes. Can I still have tradesmen in to do work?
Yes.
So would a window cleaner?
Yes, with COVID secure measures.
Righty-ho. So would a window cleaner, because they'll be outside, that does not come in to contact with a client and doesn't go in the house, can they carry on?
Yes.
Where do we stand if your work is in other people's houses in other counties? My work can take up to 6 hours to complete. I clean Arga cookers. Will I have to stop?
No, you can still work in people's homes as long as you're doing it in a COVID secure way. COVID secure way means social distancing and trying to take that to as far as you can. So if you can work in the kitchen in that particular example, and the residents of the house not be in the house or in different rooms, that's really important. Contactless appointments and contactless payments would be advised, wearing masks and so forth, and making sure that you do have the ability to give to track and trace operators where you've been and under what circumstances would be a wise thing to do.
And so I suspect that the next answer is yes to this question. As a bathroom and wet room fitter, am I okay to carry on in people's houses?
Yes, subject to what I've just said.
I think, Chris, that we can put the guidance that Shaun's talking about is working safely in other people's homes, and that has got all the elements that the tradespeople need to have in terms of their COVID secure risk assessment. And again, if it would help, we could at the end of this, we can put the link to that in the comments.
Turning to businesses now, business grants question: why is 1.3 thousand to 3,000 for 1 month the level when grants were 20 to 25,000 to safeguard businesses last time? It will close multiple businesses to have no support for their fixed costs.
So this was something that we spotted really early on about the lack of support this time for businesses forced to close. And just to be balanced, the government would say that this is for a 28-day period only, and their data would suggest that the vast majority of businesses on those rateable values, it would cover rent costs or property costs. That's what they would say. Clearly, I do understand the issues here, and we also understand from last time there's a number of businesses that just don't have business rate accounts because they are set up in a particular way. So that then leads us into this discretionary fund, which we don't have any details on at the moment. So it's a big area of work that we know we need to look into, but ultimately, again, the money that comes down from government is what pays these grants, and we have no ability to affect that other than lobby, which we are doing. I don't know whether Sophie and Claire want to say anything about this.
We did have some further detail out from the government late today about that discretionary element. Now, as I say, we'll get full details on it within the next week, but they have said to us that we'll receive an additional restrictions grant, which is a one-off payment to us that will cover discretionary grants. What they've said is that it needs to be used in either this financial year or next, and it won't be renewed. So actually that's suggesting that if we go into another lockdown later on next year, this payment will be needed to cover any discretionary element then. But what they're saying at the moment is we can use it to cover businesses that don't have a rateable value, so aren't subject to business rates, such as those that are in shared spaces, companies that have significantly high fixed costs, or businesses that have been severely impacted by the lockdown but haven't been forced to close. So we'll be looking in more detail at that over the next week or so.
And can I just say as well, that our experience last time was that the amount of money that was then given to us from government for discretionary funding simply was not enough to cover the huge amount of demand that came forward, and we therefore had to design a system that has helped as many people as we could. But of course, there were then still businesses that didn't get any support. So, and that's where our business hub that's led by Claire can come in and support you. But as I say, as a matter of priority, and it was a question that I put to the government today around business grants, the moment we've got the answers around this and the moment we've got certainty, we'll be going a hell for leather to try and get that out to you. We were one of the best performing councils in the country last time getting money out. We absolutely wanted to be one of the best performing councils, if not the best performing council this time round, and we'll absolutely want to get that money to you. It's no good that money being in our bank accounts when it could be in your bank accounts, and that's our commitment to you. But please do bear with us, because there is a huge amount of uncertainty around this area at the moment.
If there are additional grants or extended for local businesses, do you think that Telford and Wrekin might be able to include home-based businesses. I'm excluded to any current self-employed help from the government as registered from May 2019. So Shropshire County Council did include and gave £5,000 in grants, and so did 75 other local authorities. Can Telford and Wrekin please look to include this from the Home Office, please?
Yeah, so I mean, it actually really links well to what I just said. There was a huge amount of call on the discretionary funding that we had last time. We did have to make some choices to help as many people as we can, and to make that money go as far as possible. And home working was one of those areas, I think, that we did identify as being an area of, if you like, exclusion support. So it is something we'll certainly look at, and we'll do what we can. We'll learn from other councils if other councils have done something slightly different to us last time. Of course, the problem you've got is that if there's lots, and there will be indeed lots and lots of people working from home in Telford and Wrekin, what available money we have might be spread so thinly that it doesn't do a huge amount to support those people in need, and also, of course, other people miss out. So my commitment, of course, is to look at the detail around that.
Turning to the Kickstart scheme, this questioner is trying to offer Kickstart jobs, but has been told it's being delayed until next year. Do you know why it's being delayed?
So for those listeners, Kickstart is a government scheme to try and get, on the whole, young people into work. I don't
This
know.
is 16 to 24-year-olds.
Indeed, and I have not heard any news around delaying that, so I'm not quite sure what that information is. As a council, we are championing Kickstart and working with partners to deliver the placements. Claire, did you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, I agree. I haven't seen anything. I mean, we've been pushing any companies that do want to look at it through the Shropshire Chamber. So they're one of our delivery partners. So I'd suggest that you go on the Shropshire Chamber website and, register your interest there. And that's so that they can aggregate businesses, because the cutoff is 30 jobs. So, but if you are a smaller business and you want to offer 1 or 2 placements, they'll then aggregate that up in order to deliver that. So yeah, check out the Chamber website to get confirmation.
But my understanding is Kickstart hasn't been delayed. So that's a mystery to us. Can I just go back, Chris, just for a second, to a question around registrars, because we were a bit opaque in terms of our answer.
Oh, yes.
So my understanding is our registrars are open, and they are taking bookings for next year. Clearly, people will know that there aren't any, there's no availability for weddings during the lockdown period, but they're still open, available for appointments, and you can make an appointment online on the telford.gov.uk website, or phone our customer contact centre.
Grand. Going back to businesses, my company would benefit from JSS, the job security scheme, but not furlough. Why can't we choose which is better for us?
So both schemes are run by the government. So the furlough job retention scheme is available, and it is available on Flexi. So right on the beginning of the first lockdown, it was just all or nothing. You either went into the job retention scheme or you didn't. The government then changed that to allow people, employees and employers, to mix and match between working and non-working hours, and that is the system that's in place now. I don't know, to be honest, the attraction with the scheme that was going to come into being, because the job retention scheme is much more generous for employers and employees. So I'm not quite sure why you'd want to switch to the less generous scheme. But my understanding is the government are only offering the job retention scheme at this current time.
Someone who's self-employed asking what support is available for those who are self-employed and having to close and who aren't eligible for anything, and why are they having no support?
Okay, so I'll turn to Claire in a moment in terms of particular support around self-employed. The government, again, it's a government scheme, obviously not council. There is a similar system to the job retention scheme for self-employed, which I think pays around 80% of profits under certain circumstances. But obviously, I do understand, and I'm aware of many cases where people haven't been self-employed for too long, or they haven't got trading profits, and I can understand that causes a huge amount of problems. The government would say that universal credit is available to people in that position, but I'll just turn to Claire in terms of any other support we've got available for self-employed.
Yeah, so outside of if you're unable to get any specific grant support, then we're obviously there to support you in any other areas of the business that we can, and that includes identifying any creative solutions that might help you, during this period. So it's things like pay it forward schemes that a lot of self-employed potentially, they went into in the first lockdown. So this was if you are working with existing clients or customers on a regular basis, that they're keen to kind of, support you if you have that relationship with them, so that they will pay for, services that you can then deliver outside of it. But yeah, as we've said before, just get in touch with the business support team, and then we're there to give specific one-to-one advice and signpost you to anything that we know is currently available.
So with that, they could give yourselves a bell, Claire, on Telford 567 589, or drop an email to enterpristelford@telford.gov.uk to speak to a business support officer. Is there any funding for me to get my decontamination programme up and running to fight COVID-19 within care homes, schools, etc.?
So sort of start-up businesses, I'll turn to Claire again for support.
Yeah, there's limited startup grant support out there, but at the moment, although there are some ERDF schemes that are running, which are mainly based on capital equipment, so it'd be capital expenditure. So we could certainly look at signposting to that. We're also just extending our business, our startup support project, which will be kickstarting towards the end of the year. But we also there's a number of online virtual sessions that are running at the moment. In fact, we've got one coming up this week, which is Business Survival Series, and that's a series of workshops that will take you through business planning process and all that kind of thing. So, from a grant point of view, we can certainly have a look to see if there's something out there, but specifically from other areas of, business development, or where we want to identify areas of where you need to work on, then yeah, again, just get in touch with the team and we'll do our best to help and signpost where possible.
And Claire, what would be the best way to sign up for those workshops?
So that you can access the workshops online through the website, which is enterprise-telford.co.uk, or if you do sign up to our newsletter, also at that website address, we send out regular event calendar updates, so that you know what's coming up in the next few weeks. But you can also view those on the website.
Turning to the hospitality industry, then, I have a small wine bar looking to do deliveries of takeaway food, but can they also add alcohol?
Well, so this is an area at the moment that is a bit confusing, because as I understand it, pubs and restaurants can't serve takeaway alcohol under the current rules, but supermarkets can. Wine bars, I don't think, will be treated any differently to a pub. So at the moment, the government say you can't. We're pushing back, as local government association and others are pushing back on that, because it doesn't make sense for small businesses to not be able to serve alcohol on a takeaway basis with the food when supermarkets can. So at the moment, the answer is no, but we are trying our best to change that.
I run a sandwich van. Can I stay open? The sandwich van operator doesn't do deliveries, though.
So I'll turn to Nikki for this one, please.
I think it's whether it comes under the essential premises, because it is selling food. It can only do it as, if it's doing that, it can only do it as takeaway or click and collect. So I think that, again, speaking to Claire and the team about diversification and how that sandwich van may get an online presence so that people can order in advance, because what they will have to do is manage the collection of the service of food. So it's whether or not it's classed as a restaurant or whether it's classed as an essential food business. So again, we're waiting clarity on that. If it's classed as a restaurant, then again, they can do click and collect. So I think there are ways for this business to carry on working. It's just watching the guidance and either emailing into coronavirus@telford.gov.uk or emailing into Claire's team to have some further help on diversifying if they haven't got an online presence.
And just a reminder then, emailing Claire's team is enterpristelford@telford.gov.uk. What help is there for the events industry and the industry that would come to Telford and Wrekin to work on the many events that, many of which aren't happening now?
Yeah, well, this is an area that absolutely has been impacted hugely right across Telford and Wrekin, and of course across the country. And we're also aware, of course, of our big partners, people like the International Centre, exhibition companies too, and that market has been hugely impacted. Like others, we joined in a campaign and lobbying piece to government around this. We lit our buildings up in a mark of solidarity, trying to raise awareness of this. So we are not aware of anything particular or specific that the council's got to be able to do around this, but we are pushing government hard on trying to help the events industry. We do absolutely recognise the huge impact it's having, and also the huge wider impact that has on the economy too, because obviously less people are coming to Telford at the moment through business and visitor economy because of this, and we understand the huge ramifications it has.
Will there be any help for people paying private rent, please? I'm guessing these are private tenants, housing tenants.
Yeah, so the government have not at the moment extended the eviction ban. So listeners will remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the eviction ban was put in place, so people could not be evicted by their private landlord. That hasn't been renewed. However, the legislation requires landlords now to give 6 months notice to evict. So there is that safeguard, and also courts are being very sympathetic to tenants in respect of evictions. That said, clearly you should pay your rent. That is something you are obliged to do, and if you are in a situation where you're financially unable to do that, there is assistance available through benefits and other criteria. So we'd again encourage you to contact us, or to contact Citizens Advice, or if you're with a registered social landlord, they often have money advice teams, and we encourage you to go and speak to them. If you're a tenant of New Place, which obviously is a wholly owned company of Telford and Wrekin, they would encourage you to go and talk to your housing officer.
Now, here's a twist on the tradespeople coming to your home question. Hairdressers and beauty salons will have to close, but what if your hairdresser normally comes to your house? Will they be able to carry on? Is that because Nikki's shaking her head? Is that because of the close contact side to it?
Yes, Chris, it's mobile hairdressers. Hairdressers as an industry have been told that they shouldn't operate, and this is because they're close contact services. Obviously, when you're having your hair done or you're having your nails done, it necessitates that very close contact between you and the person that's providing that service. So apologies if it feels that we're giving contradictory information, because we're saying that plumbers, bathroom fitters and electricians can continue to work in the house. This is because these industries haven't been prohibited from working. In fact, construction, the government have said that they can continue trading, but hairdressers are a service that the government has said should stop trading. Therefore, unfortunately, mobile hairdressers will not be able to trade during this lockdown.
And just to give, not connected to that, but just to give you some breaking news that's just coming through to me, the government have now just in the last 15 minutes published guidance to say that pubs and restaurants will be able to offer a click and collect takeaway service for alcohol alongside meals, which is really good news and a real lifeline for hospitality.
And an answer to the question of the wine bar operator from just a few minutes ago.
But I think that just demonstrates, Chris, just how evolving the situation is, that the government are publishing stuff literally by the hour, and we'll try and do our best to keep our advice updated, but clearly, things are moving very fast.
But this is how it's been throughout the year, really, hasn't it? We've particularly in the spring when we had the daily news conferences that were held generally at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The real detail behind those headlines didn't come until some days later.
Yeah, and that's a real frustration. It's obviously a frustration for residents and businesses because they're hearing it on the news around support, whether that be business grants or support through a whole range of different sectors. And then, of course, there's that interpretation and guidance that then has to be passed down to councils and other local authorities and public bodies. And then not to mention the money coming down. So there is that delay. So it was an issue earlier in the year. And as you've heard from Sophie and from Claire earlier on, some of this guidance we're not expecting until Monday next week, i.e. Days after the lockdown started. So we will work and the teams will work really hard to get us into a position where we can help you. But we are, of course, required to wait for the government to publish their rules.
Going back into schools, we've had some questions going back into whether parents will be fined. I think we've covered all of that. But will after-school clubs stay open?
So, Nikki, I'll turn to you in terms of this. I think certain circumstances, wraparound care can continue, but again, under certain circumstances, I think. Nikki, is that right?
Yeah, you're correct, Sean. So some wraparound care is available to parents, but most after-school clubs, the guidance says should stop. So if it's a kind of a dance club or a football club or anything like that, or a drama club, those have been told that they shouldn't operate during this lockdown period. But again, as Sean said, there is some wraparound care that will be available. But again, I think we keep repeating this, we're awaiting further guidance.
Should primary school teachers be wearing masks also?
So in terms of this, again, there's nothing mandatory to make primary school teachers wear masks other than in settings where everybody else has to wear masks. However, again, I'm aware that schools are having local arrangements where they're encouraging their staff to wear masks outside of on the playground if they come into contact with parents. I know that some schools are encouraging staff to wear masks in the dining room and so on. We are aware of in secondary schools, I know slightly different, but secondary schools where there might be a change to the rules where there would be a mandatory requirement for teachers to wear masks, but that has not come in yet at this moment in time.
Here's an interesting one. What are the council's thoughts on residents being unwilling to adhere to the new rules? The questioner says, I appreciate funding such as the £500 payment for people who have been asked to isolate, but again, it takes time to claim and to be paid out. Is there any immediate help for families to access while payments are processed? I get to 2 points on that. There's the payments part of it, but first of all, what are your thoughts on anyone unwilling to adhere to the new rules?
Well, the rules are the rules, and and it is law, and there is a legal obligation on people to self-isolate. This virus doesn't care too much about who it infects. You might very well be in a situation where you've got COVID-19 and you pass that on to someone who's vulnerable, and that can result in people being gravely ill or, in the worst cases, dying. So I don't think this is a case where people have got the ability to exercise any personal discretion or choice over the point to self-isolate, and that is now backed up by law. There's a legal requirement to self-isolate, and the police will enforce against those people who don't. That said, I do think there is more that we as in the country could be doing to support people to self-isolate, particularly those people who are on low incomes. I think that there is a direct comparison to be made to jury service, in my opinion. So it is a civic duty, in my opinion, to self-isolate, just like it's your civic duty to serve on a jury. When you serve on a jury, you are compensated either through your employer or through the government, and that is your wage, your whole wage. So you should not be worse off for performing your civic duty. And my opinion would be that if you are required to self-isolate and you're told by the state to self-isolate, you should be compensated through your employer or directly. Now, that isn't the case at the moment, but that said, these £500 payments are relatively new. We are expecting more support to come through. And actually, the bottom line is that we all need everybody to follow the rules in order to get this virus down. If we get this virus down, we eradicate it, or we end up being able to manage it, it means the rest of us can continue to get on with our lives in the way that we all want to.
Shaun, you talking about jury service, for those who don't know, because not everybody will, you're a solicitor.
Yes. Don't hold that against me, though, Chris.
No, I wouldn't do. We'll start to wrap up. We've been talking over the last 1.5 hours now about the forthcoming national lockdown overtaking Tier 2. It's meant to last for 4 weeks. Will it? Will it definitely end on the 2nd of December? Do you think it'll carry on beyond that?
So I think Peter Nuttin, the leader of Shropshire Council, and I were interviewed by the Shropshire Star on this. There's an article on the Shropshire Star website answering this particular question. The reality of the situation is nobody knows. That's number one. Number two, I think the government have to be data driven, and I think that if the case numbers are not low enough to come out, I think the government will follow the data, but we'll wait and see. But even if this does work, and even if the numbers do get right down, I think even the government have admitted or conceded that we'll then return back to a regional tier system, which means that we would, if all things stay the same, would mean that we will return to a Tier 2 system here in Telford and Wrekin. Now, that isn't confirmed. We don't know whether that's going to happen or what assessments are around that. But I think the reality is that the original lockdown earlier in the year was said to have was going to take 3 weeks, and in the end it took 3 months. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be the situation here, but the government have said that it's in law time limited, but we'll have to wait and see. But I do think we all need to get that spirit back where we rally together as a community and get our numbers down. Until the last 2 or 3 weeks in Telford and Wrekin, our numbers were significantly below the regional and national averages, and that was a really good place to be, and we really need to get below that, because this is a real danger. Telford and Wrekin residents are being admitted to the hospital as we speak. There are people who live in Telford and Wrekin who are in the wards and in the ITU of our local hospitals as a result of this illness, and sadly there are residents of Telford and Wrekin dying of this disease. So it is that serious. I know that it is really, really frustrating to have our lives interrupted in this way, but the facts are very clear that the mortality rate is around between 0.5% and 1%. But the contagious level of this disease means that lots and lots of people can get it very, very quickly, and lots of people. So there's 178,000 people in Telford and Wrekin, and if we all got it, then 1% of those people statistically would not make it, and that's a huge number. That's people's families and friends, and we need to make sure we're taking this seriously.
Those watching the stream won't have seen, because you only have seen Shaun speaking, but I could see the others all nodding in agreement. And to all of you, I thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you for those watching for all your questions. For those that we haven't been able to answer, please go back to the post on Facebook. We will try to answer them in text form, in comments, but as we've been saying over the last hour and a half or so, it's very much a moving feast, and some of that news broke while we were streaming this evening. You can watch this again on our YouTube channel. It'll be there for on-demand viewing, and that's at youtube.com/Telford Wrekin. And of course, you can always come back to this post on Facebook and watch the video again, but please go back to the conversation, because any unanswered questions we will do our best to answer within those comments. And so thank you to you for your questions. Also thank you to Claire Critchell, to Sophie Lane, to Nikki Minshall, and to Councillor Shaun Davies. Stay safe. Catch you again.